Controversy is brewing around the Euros. The first piece of controversy being that I haven't been formally invited to a single game. Quite honestly, I'm offended. I feel like I'm the type of guest that they would want to have. I always bring snacks to the party. I always bring plenty of personality. I always bring at least three hot takes. I make a little list on my phone of different conversation topics so that the conversation never drops off. I just feel like it'd be a great on-field sort of companion for the European Championships, and I feel a little overlooked. I feel like all of these other content creators, they get to go. Why don't I get to go? Just kidding. I mean, I got to go to the Turkey and Netherlands match, which was awesome. We went there as part of a family trip that I'm currently on, which I am using as excellent cover for me being on the run. But that's not the only controversy. Believe it or not, not the only controversy around the Euros is that I have not been formally invited to a single game. Absolutely ridiculous, by the way. Don't they know I'm not important? How dare they? No, the other controversy has to do with this guy named Felix Zweier. Now, you might have not ever heard of Felix Zweier before, but if you have now heard of Felix Zweier, likely the only thing you know is that he is set to referee the England-Netherlands match tomorrow. And that's going to be a bit of a controversial thing because Felix Zweier has had a giant falling out with Jude Bellingham before, who you might have heard it plays for the English national team, just on every once in a while. Sometimes he turns up, sometimes he doesn't, right? But in 2021, Felix Zweier, who's this guy? That's his Wikipedia picture. Handsome man. He had a run-in with Jude Bellingham because he officiated Der Klassiker, Bayern against Borussia Dortmund in December of 2021. And in that match, Dortmund felt like they should have gotten a penalty. Bayern did get a penalty. Bayern won. Tale as old as time, right? The classic situation where you end up hating the ref after the match, where you think you kind of got screwed over by the referee and you think they kind of injected themselves into the match a bit too much. And so Jude Bellingham actually goes out after the match and straight up says, hey, when you put an official that's been accused of corruption, when you I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not going to say it exactly right, but he says essentially, when you use an official that has been suspended for corruption, has been suspended for match fixing or whatever, and you put them in charge of the biggest match in Germany, what do you expect to happen? Now, Jude Bellingham was fined. He was fined $40,000 or whatever the equivalent currency was for saying this, right? Like he was fined a really significant amount of money. Felix Zweier ended up taking 2 months off. He just left the game for a little bit and came back in February and it just returned to being an official, but he took a bit of a backseat after these sorts of accusations went flying around. The big issue and what people have really latched onto is not just that Felix Zweier has had this run-in with Jude Bellingham. It's probably what you picked up on from what Jude Bellingham said, that Felix Zweier has actually been suspended for match fixing. And we have to go back almost 20 years to find this actual match fixing. So as I am clearly somebody, like I said, I research each one of these videos for years. I've been working on this one for a decade. So I'm really glad that we could finally bring that research to light. But since this is something that a lot of people are talking about, I don't think it's as big a deal as other people are blowing it up to be. But you can be the judge for yourself because you're going to have the information, courtesy of a Guardian article, because they're the only ones that aren't charging me to read their reporting. So shout out to them. So Zweier was not the main person involved in this match-fixing scandal that happened 20 years ago. Mind you, Felix Zweier is 43 years old now. So when this is all happening, this man is legitimately 23, 24 years old. I don't know what you were doing when you were 23 or 24, but I'm assuming that you're hoping that whatever you did then is probably not going to be affecting you now if you are 40 plus. So in 2004, Zweier was working he was in professional relations with some dude named Heuser, Robert Heuser, as the referee Robert Heuser. Now, this Heuser guy was suspended for life for what ended up happening. He was banned for life, and Zweier, among other officials who brought this match-fixing plot into the open, they were suspended for lesser amounts. So essentially what happened is that Zweier came forward to the German FA. He came forward to the German FA that Robert Heuser had approached him to fix the result of a match between Rot-Weiss Essen and Cologne. This is the quote. When I got this firm offer from Heuser, I went to my refereeing colleagues. I stress once again that I strongly rejected this offer. straight away. So you might be wondering why Felix Fire was suspended at all. That would be some sort of like shooting the messenger operation. Well, it was uncovered. And while he's always denied that he actually did the match fixing with Robert Heuser, and clearly he reported the idea that Heuser had approached them to fix this match in the second division. There was an exchange of money between Heuser and Svire. Now, Svire denied, I'll just read this paragraph, the he being Svire here. Svire has always denied being involved in Heuser's fix of a game between Wuppertal and Werder Bremen B in 2004, although a DFB investigation discovered he had accepted a payment of €300 from Heuser. So basically, they found evidence that there had been a €300 exchange of money from Heuser to Felix Svire for a different match, not the one that Felix Svire came forward and said that he was being asked to fix. It is very worth pointing out that this early 20s referee, who was clearly already on the rise because he was refereeing some second division matches, right? It's very, very, very important to point out that he actually brought all this to light and was part of the reason that this whole match fixing scandal was put away. He actually reported it to the German FA in the first place. So the only reason he ever got in trouble was this exchange of €300 around what they assume was this match of Wuppertal against Werder Bremen's B team in 2004. Okay, so 20 years ago, €300 exchanged hands. After this, right, that he ended up reporting the match fixing to the DFB, and he ended up getting suspended. But the suspension was actually only for 6 months. According to this article, by the time the investigation was completed, he was suspended for 6 months in 2006, but that didn't come out until way later. It hit the headlines in apparently 2014. But the strangest thing of this whole story is that the suspension wasn't like announced publicly in 2006. It actually came out in 2014 after he had been relisted by FIFA for a couple of years, right? And he was already on the rocket ship ascent to being one of the elite referees in all of Europe. It came out that he had been suspended as part of the Heuser investigation back in 2006. So to me, the creepiest part of this entire process is the fact that it was not public knowledge that he had been suspended for 6 months for this exchange of €300 back in 2006. That being said, I am normally an absolutist when it comes to this sort of thing. Like, if you are caught match fixing as a referee, you should never be allowed to referee again, and this is a load of nonsense. Now, I feel like Felix Zweier is in a weird gray area here where this was clearly a very long time ago. Felix Zweier largely has been considered one of the elite referees in Europe for a good bit of time now, with the exception of this run-in with Jude Bellingham. There's a couple of other matches that people have pulled up, but I believe that if you referee long enough, there's always going to be a couple of matches where people believe that you're rigging it against them. That's just the nature of being a referee, right? But the exchange of €300, which they never were able to prove had to do with anything, that is such a small amount of money that I'm at least inclined to partially believe it might, like, these guys were friends, they were colleagues, that amount of money being exchanged could have been for a hefty dinner price tag. You know, like it is possible that was not it. Felix Zweier vehemently denies that it had anything to do with the match fixing. I think that basically the mutual agreement was just he served a 6-month suspension just because that €300 exchange looked suspicious. But we have to remember that Zweier is the guy that reported being asked to fix matches. Right, so this is somebody that has reported being asked to fix matches, has taken down a match-fixing ring, and actually gotten one of his other official colleagues suspended for life for match fixing. So the insinuation by Jude Bellingham that he is a referee that match fixed before is just not something that I feel like sticks as well as it sounds when Jude Bellingham's talking about that. Now, Jude Bellingham's like freaking 18 years old when this happened, right? And you just lost a heartbreaking match where you feel like the official was against you. You're going to be scratching and clawing and trying to grab onto anything to be able to make your point. And the fact that the official was, 16, 17 years ago at that point, was suspended for 6 months for taking €300 from somebody who was banned for life for match fixing. I mean, that is a pretty obvious thing to grab onto. That's the obvious ledge when you're rock climbing here, to be like, screw this guy. I knew this guy was messing with me. I knew this guy was trash. But I don't think, like, going into this semifinal, I don't think that you can look at Felix Zweier and feel a sense of apprehension that somehow he's going to be involved in match fixing. I mean, UEFA and FIFA know how it would look if they actually put somebody on that precipice that had serious skeletons in their closet. I don't think Felix Zweier, based off having looked at this, it's not the only article I read. This one just had all the information. Like I said, 10 years of research. I don't think that you can look at this match and say that Felix Veer is somehow a tainted official. I feel like the biggest concern would be like Felix Veer and the star player of one of the two teams have had a very public run-in, right? Like obviously Felix Veer wasn't out in the public having conversations about it, but I mean Jude Bellingham was fined. Veer spent 2 months out of the game because of the severe amount of backlash caused by Jude Bellingham's reaction. I mean there's probably a serious amount of personal animosity between Jude Bellingham and Felix Veer that I feel like should be a much bigger concern than the actual suspension that happened 18 years ago. Right? I feel like, if anything, if I was an England fan, I'd be worried that Felix Veer's got it out for Jude Bellingham just because of a personal vendetta, because Jude Bellingham made Felix Veer's life so much harder, right? And if I was Jude Bellingham, I would be worried that Felix Veer is going to do the same thing. Or if I'm Felix Veer, I'd be worried that Jude Bellingham is going to make a giant ruckus about the whole thing anytime he doesn't get every single call. So maybe you're going to be a little more inclined to give the benefit of the doubt to Jude Bellingham, because you don't want to have Jude Bellingham trumpeting up in the press again about how, digging up old skeletons that Felix Veer, I'm assuming, desperately wants to stop having to talk about because it happened 20 years ago. So that human element of Zveyer officiating Jude Bellingham is probably a bigger concern. But there's all these headlines and posts about like this guy had formerly been convicted of match fixing. It just doesn't smell like that, right? It doesn't even come off nearly as weird to me as that one Copa America referee who got caught with the jersey of one of his teams in the referee's locker room. It was 300 euros 20 years ago, and the guy actually was the person that reported and took down the match fixing ring himself. So is Felix Zveyer is not going to dodge controversy officiating this match, but I don't think he's like a dirty ref. And I don't think FIFA and UEFA would risk putting somebody that they knew was liable for that in charge of this type of match. I mean, they're like scummy and corrupt, but they're not stupid, you know? I mean, they can be. Yeah, it's not, I don't want to rest my point on UEFA and FIFA not being stupid, but you get what I mean, right? Right?